Well, of course, right about now, it's a full house and the vibe is on. Anyway, just a few minutes to our very last hour of Smart Minutes Business. And of course, still today is the 9th of October, 2023. And guess what? Today is Independence. And of course, just keep reminding you, happy Independence, Ugandans. It's good to actually have gotten a little freedom at last, and we can do on our own. Anyway, joined with Andrew Barije and of course Godwin Batman. We're going to be discussing matters, the progress of Uganda, where we have performed best, and of course where we are still lagging as a country as we celebrate 61 years of independence. But don't forget that these conversations are proudly brought to you by ZAB. So regardless, today being a public holiday, I have to keep reminding you that tomorrow is yet another day for you to invest. So whether you have a mobile phone, whether you have a smartphone, whether you have a button phone or community, like some of them call it, you can invest with Zabo, but as low as 15,000 Ghana shillings. All you have to do is dial *292#. That is the USSD code. And of course, start investing, start buying, start selling in government bonds, securities. So their working days are from Monday to Friday. And of course, except for public holidays, which today is exceptional as well. It's a public holidays. So opening time on normal days is always at 8:15 a.m. to 3:15 p.m. 6 working hours. So they are powered by Alltex East Africa, telling you to do something new. And of course, Zabo says, your money is your future. Well, of course, like I said, it's a full house. Like I feel the heat, it's heating up. And of course, right about we're going to be talking about so far, like we've talked about we're talking about the manufacturing sector, the performance, and of course, want to see so far what haven't we done, what has been in the pipeline, and of course that we have not really achieved for the 61 years that we haven't achieved, and want to give you reasons as to why we have been continuously trying to survive in these areas, and of course we've not yet really reached to the full dot of it all.
Yeah, of course. Now, with these discussions at hand, we have quite a number of factors which, despite the few successes we've actually attained, and I feel like we've failed to really attain somewhere. I mean, to balance out certain things, most especially when it comes to poverty, and inequality when it comes to the incomes, of the people. And we see that Uganda's poverty rate is still high. That is at about 36.5%, according to the look of things here, with the population, of the population which is living, that is below the poverty line. That is in 2020. That is as of results. These are results compiled over a decade. Now, inequality is also high at the same time, with the richest 10% of the population earning more than 30% of the country's income. Isn't that quite a viable aspect?
That's interesting. Of course, as we get into this conversation, we have to say happy independence again to Uganda. Yeah. We have made 61 years. And of course, we cannot have this conversation, of course, without celebrating our independence. But of course, understanding where have we come from, where are we going. We just talked about in the earlier segment with Mercy how when President Joram Museveni came in 1986, he introduced, of course, the privatization of government-owned enterprises, government-owned businesses. So it allowed people to start thinking that they can start investing on an individual level. And then, of course, there was a bolster, there was an improvement in our agriculture sector and huge focus around it. But now we talked about one of the highest leading agriculture producers in East Africa at the time, and our economy was booming. This is over 30 plus years ago, over 34 years ago, agriculture was leading that movement. But we're seeing now, despite all that, what has failed us as a country all these years? I mean, we're almost 30, all of us are under 30 around here. But imagine what has happened in our country and what are we struggling with after all these years. And for me, one of the key factors that I've noticed is obviously there's a bias in inequality. Inequality comes from the many tribes we also have in this country. Some will argue, arguably, that some tribes have more favorable treatment as compared to others. This is an arguable statement. But of course, having lived my own experience here in Uganda has shown me, especially having come from two different tribes, having been raised by one tribe and having been raised by another tribe. I see the response I get when I walk into the room as Batuma, And I see the response I get when I walk into the room as chair union.
Oh my goodness.
So my experience is that my lived experience is quite unique. I've gone to places where I almost don't even have to mention my chair union name because immediately there's a buzz. I've walked into places, I have literally done business with a lady and she said, "Oh, you're Batuma. That means you're my friend. I can invest in you. Are your family? I'm going to support your business because you're family." This has been told by a very wealthy person to me in this country of ours. So my own lived experience in this country is one where I start to see this inequality from that personal level. There's that imbalance where you find that other people are favored over others in the employment sector. So there's a high rate of unemployment going on in Uganda. We talked about the high unemployment levels in Uganda last week are doubling, and we have over 18. How many? 40% people are youth are under 18 in this country of ours. So we have so many youth in this country, but there's still high unemployment rate. Why? Because the older people don't want to retire. Someone wants to work till they're 784 years in age. People don't want to retire. They love the benefits that the work gives them. So there's less and less opportunities for the younger people to get into these workspaces. I mean, think about it, Andrew. When you walk into a job like ours, they ask you for 15 years experience. 10 years experience in sales, 10 years experience in communication. Where are you supposed to get this experience? It doesn't exist. So the idea of unemployment is strong, it's staggering within the country, and for many, many factors. The inequality, there is inequality in terms of, there's a disparity with the wealth gap. So we're one of those countries where you find someone living in Kololo, and right in Kololo there's a slum. In that same area that's supposed to be high profile area. You go to Muyenga, there's Chitegomba right downstairs, and then you're looking at one of the wealthiest people living on the hill of Muyenga, and some of the poorest people living right next door. So we have that right next to each other. So someone in a slum will wake up and look at this high rise and just stare and say, my goodness.
The rich are really rich.
And it's in your face. It's almost like India. There's a complete disparity between the wealthy and the poor. And how we're able to merge that gap within the country is one of the things we need to really discuss.
Well, for me, actually, we must all agree that when it comes to infrastructure, I think that is where we have failed. Infrastructure, when you look at the roads, much as the construction of the roads still, they're in a very, very, very bad state. Actually, if you're to compare, those days in the 70s and the 80s, you must, even though we had these tarmac maram roads, you know, they were actually more okay than now that, you know, it's better you have that dusty road than having the one that has potholes.
That's a very important point, Mercy. We talked about it earlier when we were talking about Tanzania and what they're facing in terms of infrastructure. This is Tanzania. They're having an ongoing conversation regarding infrastructure. So there's been delays getting fresh produce from farms to the market because of the poor roads, there's poor infrastructure, but there's something that's an ongoing conversation, right? So imagine us who are primarily an agricultural sector struggling with extremely poor roads. So there's a delay bringing fresh goods all the way from Gulu, from Masaka, from Wakiso, all the way to the market. So farmers are struggling to be able to get their produce in time because we're largely an agricultural country, isn't it? So that infrastructure problem is another problem that has to be addressed. I know there's talks about the different roads that are being created. There's partnerships that are happening with Russia about infrastructure. This was in the papers the other day. There's partnerships with China, of course, to be able to bolster infrastructure development here, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Because I'm wondering, after all these years, we're 61 years of independence and we're so grateful, but I wonder why aren't we progressing? Another thing I think is corruption. Let's talk about the rate of corruption of our leaders that we have in the country. Because listen, with just getting your license done, you have to go through so many checks and balances. You have to pay somebody to pay someone, right? I mean, not even checks and balances rather, but you have to pay someone to get you something quick. So you're finding that a lot of this business are not well researched. People are just getting quick licenses because they've paid some extra money. So there's not enough research that's done behind these investments. There's not enough support that's given to them in terms of have that support for investors, for entrepreneurs and local businesses, as well as small businesses here. So people are struggling because the leaders are corrupt and they're taking some of that money right in the economy. So we find that a lot of that money is stifled onto one person. You find that leader has been caught having stolen how much? 700 billion Uganda shillings. And that money could have gone towards development of a different sector within the country. So we're struggling with incredible high corruption as well as fraud that's on the increase within the country. So it makes it incredibly hard for investors to want to invest in a country that doesn't seem safe, that doesn't seem to have those kind of protections for investment. We talk about high rate of investment as well, high rate of doing business, expensive rate of doing business within the country. Almost like you have to pay 10 people before you start your business, and 10 people are all waiting on that money. So there's no real checks and balances. So investors who are abroad, who are slowly putting money behind. We talked about the fraud, the scamming culture within the country. I love that, the news always informs the state of a country, right? We talked about the state of the scamming culture within the country, and there was one of the ministers that was saying that people who come and use other investors' money and invest it in the country, invest it in a business, right? But because you're using someone else's money, there isn't enough check and balance with that business, right?
Yes.
We need to find out from the person that's buying the airtime on that business to where the money is going. It has to be accounted for. But we talked about it. The minister said that because many Ugandans are not using their own money to invest in business, there's lack of ownership that happens with these business owners, right? There's lack of ownership because they're thinking, I'm using someone else's money, it's someone else's loss. I sold them on a really good investment. I have investors that are putting on over $2 billion, 700 billion Uganda shillings, but there's no accountability done on the ground because the person is thinking, I've just gotten my quick buck and I'm off to the races. But there's a lack of that accountability. Whereas this is like we talked about Mulwana, people that are able to put some of their own money aside and then later seek funding are people who are thriving more in Uganda because you have your own money on the line. And once you have your own money on the line, it's much easier for you to be on ground and make sure the business thrives. It's like your baby.
Okay.
That lack of ownership is important.
Very interesting. Maybe before we switch to some other discussion in here, maybe personally, I'll talk about two factors and each leading to the other. One is there is excess of the informal sector, which is dominating, which I feel like we failed.
Yeah.
And with the informal sector dominating the country, that means there is going to be a low tax base. And once the tax base is low, definitely you're going to rely more on foreign aid. We are also over-relying on foreign aid. That is some of the aspects we are talking about. Now, maybe you also need to understand that most of these enterprises that have been established, we've looked at the manufacturing progresses we've achieved. We also need to understand these were made possible by the different policies that were being put in place by particular regimes at a certain time. Now, for this particular time, we've chosen the three dominant regimes, which actually in Uganda's political history since independence, it's the talk everywhere you go. That is Idi Amin, Dr. Milton Obote, and definitely President Yoweri Museveni. Till date, it's still that. But now we kickstart off. Let's take a look at. We're going to be looking at every regime, how the policies at that particular regime affected Uganda's economy at that time till Museveni's regime. And to kickstart off here, let's see Idi Amin's regime. That is from 1979 till 1972. We see that its impact on the economy of Uganda. The GDP rate was at negative 5.3%, and the foreign direct investment inflows reached up to $15 million US. That is up to 1979, and the private sector investment as a share. But maybe I would love them to know that during this time, its impact on business growth, Asians owned about 80% of the businesses before they were expelled. And we see that this means that their expulsion led to a sudden dramatic loss of entrepreneurial talent. Asians also played a key role in Ugandan economy as skilled workers, but of course they were vanished just like that. And now we know that they were also the major taxpayers at the time in Uganda. The expulsion led to a significant decline in government revenue, which made it difficult for the government to provide essential services and invest in infrastructure. And now we see that still the expulsion of Asians at the same time led to a loss of confidence in the Ugandan economy, and this made it difficult for foreign investors to invest in Uganda and for Ugandan businesses to have access to credit. So you can clearly see in the figures, the GDP growth rate was negative, that is 3.9%. Now, of course, these figures show that the expulsion of Asians, that is from Uganda, had a significant negative, that is impact on business growth, the Ugandan economy at large. But of course, this led to loss of entrepreneurial talent, we shall agree, skilled labor, tax revenue, foreign investment, and of course, even businesses were found it hard to access credit. So that means the economy wouldn't really progress much more further.
And it's an interesting conversation as well, continued about, I wonder if people always wonder, was it the right move to have expelled the
Indians
Asians at the time? Because of course, they're incredibly high and skilled on labor. But I wonder, was that skilled labor being transferred? Was it transferable? And were they training? Were the Indians that were skilled? Were they trying to train people under them?
They weren't training them, and this is what. Now, this is the aspect of patriotism,
right?
Because it only needed time for the Ugandans to adapt to the system. I know whenever changes are happening in any regime, of course, setbacks ought to be experienced. We saw when Ruto came in power, I'm just giving an example, when we saw issues happening, that's when we see strikes in Kenya, taxes increasing. But why? Uhuru's regime, probably there were aspects that were done that made Kenya get into huge anyway, I'm just digressing a little bit to show you that whenever a policy is being put in place, because Ruto came with new policies, however much they were pressing hard, they were a little bit, the intention is to revive the economy back.
It was very progressive. The same thing that Tinubu is doing in Nigeria in the first 100 days. There's so many policies he's put in place, right? Even with the strike that almost happened on October the 2nd or 3rd, he was able to come in front of that and say, I promise I'm going to switch this economy around. And those policies, yes, they do create a lot of change. You talked about Amin being overthrown. Idi Amin's overthrow created a hyperinflation within the country. It was one of the worst inflation rates we've ever had as a country. Well, we talked about earlier in the segment where people almost taking wheelbarrows of money to go buy a pint of milk. The inflation was ridiculous at the time because there was that shift in government, right? Shift in the economy as well. But I also wondered, because the skilled labor says it was a huge detriment on our economy from the Indians. So I wonder if we took on enough of that training or that stewardship from the Indian people. Because I obviously understand Idi Amin had he had foresight, but didn't have foresight at the same time. He's like, let's start and build by Uganda, but there was no skill in place to be able to take over. So a lot of Ugandans were given those businesses to take over, the Indian businesses, did you know? But they didn't have any skill to promote or bolster that business at the time. So many Ugandans were given those many shops that the Indians left behind when they were expelled. There's so many, if you look at that Idi Amin documentary, and they show why there was such a decline, where many Ugandans who are not equipped to manage these businesses, they had no skill whatsoever, led to its complete decline. So I wonder, in any business, if there's that complete transference in terms of training, and in any business, in any country, I would expect when people are coming to invest, foreign investors, I would expect that their priority is to hire and train the local staff as part of the policy. I would expect that kind of policy, not to come with your own staff, right? And then train them, as we constantly see, where you go to a place where there's a lot of foreigners, but hiring many foreigners as well, coming with the foreigners from their own countries and filling up those businesses. I would rather, as these investors are coming into the country, we also prioritize the domestic labor that we're getting and then training them, so we can also start to bolster those skills and transfer them.
All right, very interesting. And maybe sure that we can take a look at Obote's regime in here as we are taking a look at the different regimes. And now, of course, we get to know that under this regime, there was what we call currency devaluation, which happened in there. In 1981, Obote II government devalued the Ugandan shilling by 90%, and this made Ugandan exports more competitive in international markets, which helped to boost exports and promote the growth of export-oriented business. Now, Uganda's exports increased from $180 million in 1980 to $300 million in 1981. Now, yes, that was a policy. Then there was also Obote's policy of trade liberalization. Maybe before we get into any further, the GDP growth rate was at 1.3. Yes, it's 1.3 because of after the economy, the downfall of the economy during Amin's regime, and Obote is trying to get it back for indirect investment inflows, $10 million and the private sector investment share, 10%. For the interest of time, we are trying to see how we can really wrap this up so fast. Now, of course, also Dr. Obote had a policy of trade liberalization, and this made it easier for Ugandan businesses to export goods, which helped to boost trade and promote economic growth at the same time. Now, Uganda's trade turnover, that is imports plus exports, increased from $360 million to 1980. In 1980 to $600 million in 1981. Now you can see what really Obote did. Now, of course, Museveni's regime, which is happening right now, we've had discussions of Mercy and Godwin. We're actually sharing further the privatization, which is quite a major policy for his regime to make individuals be in position to actually own these enterprises. But there is a key factor which is still building up in here. When we return from the break, we want to really understand. Yes, we understand there is a record of economic growth which is being recorded on Museveni's regime. But the ultimate question is that why are Ugandans still living in poverty despite what is recorded in there? And of course, definitely, when we return from this, I shall be expounding more of that. Stick around.
24, Driving Business.
Farming practices are evolving in incorporating new technologies to address the challenges of agriculture, especially in arid regions like United Arab Emirates, UAE. UAE's commitment to modern farming techniques is essential for ensuring food security and sustainability. The UAE has embraced modern farming practices, which likely includes hydroponics, aeroponics, and other advanced technologies to grow crops efficiently in desert environments. The adaptation of modern farming in desert areas is crucial for countries like UAE, where traditional agriculture may not be feasible due to limited water resources and harsh environmental conditions. Mentioning the world's largest vertical soliless facility in Bostania showcases the innovative approach to agriculture. Vertical farming allows for maximization space and resource efficiency, producing an average of 3,000 leafy greens daily in a significant accomplishment. This efficient production can help meet local demand for fresh produce and reduce the need for imports. Saving 95% less water is a remarkable achievement. In water-scarce regions, conserving water resources is crucial for sustainable farming. The absence of pesticides highlights the commitment to environmentally friendly and sustainable farming practices. The UAE's investment in modern and sustainable agriculture is not only beneficial for the country's food security, but also serves as an example for other regions facing similar challenges. This technology-driven approach to farming can potentially be a solution to global food production issues, especially in areas affected by climate change and water scarcity. Bostanica translates to your garden in Arabic, reflecting the farmer's mission to provide fresh and locally grown produce in the urban setting. Bostanica holds a distinction of being the world's largest vertical farm, covering a vast area of 330,000 square feet. It is a significant investment in modern agriculture. The facility represents a substantial investment of approximately $40 million. This substantial financial commitment highlights the importance of vertical farming in the future of sustainable agriculture.
Bostanica, we are a soilless facility that produces 3,000 kg, 3 tons daily of leafy greens. We are the world's largest vertical farm. Zero herbicides, zero pesticides and all. And we use, again, 95% less than water than traditional agriculture. So whereas in 1 kg of leafy greens in conventional farming, you would use 317 liters of water, at Bostanica, the same 1 kg of leafy greens would be consuming only 15 to 17 liters of water, which is 95% less. And we're proud of this.
Bostanica boasts an impressive annual output of 1 million kilograms, that is 10,000 metric tons of fresh produce per year. On a daily basis, it produces 3 metric tons of produce. This level of the production can help meet the growing demand for locally sourced and sustainable food. The farm employs efficient growing techniques, with a journey from seed to plant-led taking just in 2 weeks. This indicates an advanced technology and precision agriculture methods used in this facility. Bostanica cultivates a wide variety of crops, including beet, parsley, lilac, Moni Romani, ruby sky spinach, kale, arugula, microgreens, mixed herbs, and strawberries. This diversity allows for well-rounded selection of fresh produce for consumers. Overall, Bostanica serves as an exemplar of the potential of vertical farming to revolutionize agriculture for producing large quantities of high-quality, locally grown food in urban areas, reducing the environment impacts associated with traditional farming methods, and addressing the growing demand for sustainable and fresh produce.
Say goodbye to paperwork and travel costs. Now every MTN customer can register to invest in securities anytime and anywhere with Zabu in a few simple steps. Step 1. Dial *292#. Step 2, select option 1. Register with Zabu. Step 3, enter your full names. Step 4, enter your national identification number. Step 5, enter your national identification card number. In 24 hours, you will receive an SMS confirming your registration. Congratulations, you are now ready to invest. Smart 24, driving business.
Well, of course, that is it. And of course, we are in our last segment of Smart Men's Business, all the way from 7 a.m. till now, still driving you regarding business. Of course, don't forget that these conversations are proudly brought to you by Zabu. Regardless being a public holiday, Zabu is going to open its doors tomorrow. So if you want to invest in government bond securities, Zabu says, look no further. All you have to do is dial *292#, and of course that is the USSD code. You can follow the prompts, you can buy, you can sell, you can learn about the products, you can go straight to the bonds. I mean, there are also maturity periods in which you want your money to mature in. But of course, today being a public holiday, Zabu isn't operational, but starting tomorrow, being a Tuesday till a Friday, Zabu is going to open its doors. But its doors are open at from 8:15 a.m. till 3:50 p.m. 6 working hours, just 6. So if you have time on yourself, once in a while, do check in with Zabu. And of course, they tell you your money is your future, and they're powered by Alltex East Africa, telling you to do something new. Well, of course, conversations still rotating around the 60 years of independence. Actually, before we left, we were looking at the different regimes and how, it took an effort in Obote's regime to revamp the economy, having slipped a little from Amin's regime. And of course, we're going to look at Museveni's regime, which is the current regime from 1986 till date. Those are many years. Those are 30 plus years. And of course, we see a lot has been done regarding investment, and of course policies have been set in place, and of course to help attract the foreign investment and promote growth at domestic businesses in Uganda. So I do not know what you guys have to say about this current regime. Having lived it, at least you have a testament for the years you've been in existence to see how we've progressed over the years.
I mean, I don't know what you think, Andrew, but obviously we see that in Museveni's regime, we see that the Museveni has implemented a number of economic policies since 1986. These policies have had a mixed impact on Uganda's economic growth and development, right? So we see economic policies implemented by the Museveni government. Investment promotion policies is one. The Museveni government has implemented a number of investment promotion policies, such as tax incentives. Obviously, there's tax incentives, there's tax holidays on businesses, and then we have the creation of the stop investment centers. These policies have helped to attract foreign investment and promote the growth of domestic businesses. It's a huge conversation in terms of how do we promote the growth of domestic, especially after the privatization of business and economy. How is that something that, of course, in your experience as Museveni's government, I don't think we've seen any other president. All I've seen is Museveni. I don't know about any other regime. So.
Yeah. But of course, I'm seeing here something when it comes to the SMEs, and of course, his regime, the current regime, has actually made sure that they have implemented a number of SMEs. I mean, we see a couple of people coming up with small businesses, and of course, they've come up with SMEs development policies, such as access to finance,
guidance, business training, and of course market access programs. Of course, these policies have helped to promote growth of SMEs, which are a major driver to economic growth and employment in Uganda. Have you realized that we have very many small businesses that people have come up and people, you know, are being self-employed? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Mima, what I actually would love to look into, the big ultimate question here is that why are Ugandans still living in poverty? Despite now, like what both of you have read, increase in this, increase in that, but the reality, what is on ground, people are not experiencing these new incentives as a result of that. Now, of course, a normal person out there, an individual, or what we call them, you would love to. And I believe this is something that you normally ask yourself too, from that perspective. Why am I still broke, despite the incentives the regime is putting out there? But we need to look into these factors in here. I can see the high population, which is growing at about 3.3%, per year.
Wow.
Population increment of 3.3% per year, and this is not comparable in any way to the rate at which economic growth. So economic growth and the population is taking the economy. So that means the resources are scarce, and there is a huge effort to fight for that. But definitely, in such circumstances,
with the employment
rate, poverty is inevitable. Poverty
because obviously the strain on the resources, especially think about Kampala, right? Imagine the concentration of people in just one place.
One area.
Because think about Kampala, like America or New York, everyone comes from Gulu, Kitgum, all the places
businesses
to come and make it, right? You study in Gayaza Girls, you study in Mwiri, you study in Berenyanji Girls, all the people that studied in the village areas, right? Are all coming to Kampala, and they're all fighting for the same resources, for the same employment. So it strains, it puts a strains on the economy as a whole as well. So I would say.
Yeah, then you were mentioning something about inequality. Equal wealth distribution.
Exactly. It's something I'm passionate about, and I talk about it through my own lived experience, right? Being Batuma and Chene, from having had two names from two different regions, my mother and father, and how I'm treated based on how I walk in a room as Batuma, and how I'm treated when I walk into a room as Chene. And this is my own lived experience, and I'm sure other Ugandans also have the same experience in being able to get jobs. Are you able to have access to these jobs because someone is looking at you and thinking, you're not part of my tribe? There's a lot of tribalism. It's a whole thing that happens. We're tribalistic as a country. So some people lean on the Japadola people, or Uganda. So we do have a lot of intermarriage, but when it comes to the economic sector, unemployment levels are high because people are picking and choosing their own. Then I think nepotism is another issue. Regarding tribalism, there's another layer of nepotism, right? So you find within the government itself, you hire within family, right? So that you know within someone that you know. So if there are jobs that are nepotism, even within the office culture itself, right? So someone is not putting out an advert for a job, he's putting it in-house. Or is saying, listen, this job will be for someone within the company. So they're not putting out as much of that advert for the job. For the people on the outside trying to get into the Stanbic Bank, for example, as an example, Standard Chartered, all these banks are trying to get into it and thinking, let's advertise in-house before we advertise out-house. So that also puts a strain on the employment level, and of course the poverty levels are still very high because of that.
Very true. Very true. And of course, we also looked into the informal sector. Despite the fact that we see the recordings of economic growth and involvement in Uganda during the 70s regime, people are still poor. We saw the informal sector coming in here before what we failed, and now we see it gets it back to it really being a bigger factor to why we're still living in poverty.
It's true, right? There's not enough of the informal sector, there's a lot of the formal. So we're finding that...
because the informal people don't pay taxes.
Exactly.
They don't pay taxes.
So also there's a high rate of doing business in the formal sector.
Even the wages are
high,
low.
yes.
The wages are low, actually. If you look at the informal sector, the wages are low. Imagine a builder is earning maybe 150,000. I mean, if they do taxes, how much are they going to walk away with at the end of the day? Though it's their obligation as a Ugandan to pay taxes, but then to them they feel like it's a burden.
And of course, I think another important thing is something we've been talking about the whole time in terms of, especially after the UMA trade show, I've been open, my brain has been opened up to seeing a lot of younger people doing their own businesses, starting and becoming their own employers, right? Because the employment rate is quite high. But I also feel as an economy, we have an over-reliance on agriculture, right? We rely so much on agriculture, and this is such a vulnerable sector, right? Because it's prone to things like
climate change.
We talked about it. about this in the first segment, right? It's very prone, especially now we've been talking about the heavy change in weather, incredibly changed. We talked about the El Nino that was happening in September. So there's flooding that's happening, there's incredible rain, and then there's incredible drought. It's unpredictable weather. It's very unpredictable, right? So it's also harder and strenuous on the agriculture economy. It's harder for the farmers as well to be able to predict how can we start to improve our agriculture sector. We're too reliant on it, and I think we need to diversify our economy. Like we talked about with Tanzania, where they're focusing on the livestock and fisheries industry. They're pushing their tourism industry. And Tanzania, President of Tanzania said she wants to make Tanzania the hub for tourism in East Africa. I think we covered that last week. She wants to make Tanzania the next tourist hub within East Africa. Everyone knows that has been Kenya for the longest time, but she's actively pushing towards the tourism sector, the fisheries industry, the livestock industry. They have over 30,000 people that are employed, right, in the fishery industry, and improving and bringing a lot of incredible technology, right, to be able to bolster the fisheries industry. So we also need to be able to actively bolster other sectors and not rely so much on agriculture, which has been our leading tool in all these years, in all the 30 plus years we've been alive.
Okay, very absolutely interesting. And actually, climate change is part of the key factors in here that we see that are a threat to Uganda's economy and development, and we see that it is causing more frequent and severe droughts and floods, which are damaging crops and livestock, and making it more difficult for the people in rural areas to earn a living and, of course, escape poverty at the same time. Well, corruption.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is
That's the leading.
I think that's one of the biggest.
The biggest factors that has led to, as a reason as to why most people are poor in Uganda, because at the end of the day, someone wants something in exchange, and people are very confident. Someone, if you're going for driving school, someone is going to be like, you know what, for you to get a driver's license, a driving permit, ABC, and has to take place.
Right. So we're finding that there's not enough checks and balances. There's low quality on stuff, right? We have find people just paying their way.
And the poor are the ones that are
done.
being affected in all this.
Yeah. Talk about employment and corruption, right? People are asking for money for you to be hired at a place.
Yeah.
So someone says, before I hire this job, before I take you through the HR, pay me 2 million, and then you get the job right away. So now someone who's getting to the employment sector doesn't even have the access to that kind of money.
Even on
he has
payroll.
to borrow.
Payroll.
Right? He has to borrow to get the job. Or even when they say, listen, when you get that job, you're going to start paying me every month for the first 3 months.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of corruption on every level. So we're finding that creates a high rate of unemployment. Of course, that's why the poverty rate is still incredibly high in the country. And I think another example would be, I think, that limited access to healthcare and education. Most of these jobs that are hiring, we're talking about the job employment rate. Many jobs don't give you Medicare. They don't give you health insurance.
Yeah, insurance. Yeah.
So you're relying solely on your salary. Let's say you're making 600,000 a month, and that's what you're relying on for your dental. If you have kids, for healthcare, that's what you're spending it on. You don't have health insurance. Many of these jobs do not provide the health insurance. We talked about even in the formal sectors, where they're supposed to get that health insurance from. People are not paying for health insurance. They're not paying for those health premiums because the premiums are still incredibly high on the people. So that affects the economy as a whole.
Yeah, now of course, as we wind this up, we've been mentioning corruption, which is quite a major key factor. And according to our latest reporting here from the Inspectorate of Government, the total cost of corruption in Uganda is estimated at about 9.1 trillion per year, which is actually equivalent to about 44% of total government revenue. Now, this is a report as of 2019. And now this estimate is based on a study that considered both direct and indirect costs of corruption, and of course direct costs include those that are attributed to corrupt acts such as the cost of bribes, embezzlement, and misappropriation of public funds. And also we see indirect costs in here, which include negative impact of corruption on economic growth and poverty reduction and human development at the same time. Now, they also found out that the highest cost of corruption was estimated for environmental protection sector. That is there to about 2.8 trillion Ugandan shillings, that is per year. And this was also followed by public procurement sector, the security sector. Actually, the public procurement sector brings into, it is estimated at 2.8 trillion, the corruption rate. And the security sector, 1.8 trillion. And the taxation sector, 1.3 trillion. All these are Ugandan shillings. Yes, so, and this has had quite a number of factors to Uganda's economy. Yeah, we come to the end of today's show. Well, that is Smart Means Business on the Independence Day, 9th October. And once again, happy 61st Independence Day that is to Uganda. But of course, on Smart Means Business, I will always bring you these factors as we bring you up-to-date points so that you can actually think and make a decision on that. But of course, still to remind you that DSTV channel 372, GOTV channel 320, we are also on free-to-air. You can catch us. And for those of you that are largely obsessed with gadgets, well, you could go to Google Play Store and download the Smart Digital application. And the most amazing aspect about this application is that you will be able to stream Smart 24 TV, listen to NBS Radio, and listen to Smart FM also. And also now Twitter handles at Smart 24 TV, and that's on Twitter. And the Smart 24 TV official, that's on Facebook. And for the YouTube lovers, Smart 24 TV live in there. And for those of you that are business researchers, you're looking for that website that has up-to-date business facts, business news, and so many more. Smart 24 TV is the home for you. You're a business researcher, you are in a business university, you need up-to-date business facts for your research. That is the website for you. And you can also come to our very home here at Plot 42, Nile Avenue, where we broadcast live all those points, and we can actually discuss matters to do with business. We can partner together, see how we can help each other to grow each other's business. I've been Andrew Barije, Masi Katsime, and Godwin Batumache Yune here, breaking you down these matters on the Independence Day. And the topic of discussion has been majorly on Uganda's business accomplishments in the past 61 years. But of course, on that note, go get some breakfast. And I understand you're home, but you could get some breakfast. And for those of you that are essential workers, like I and Masi and Godwin, we're here. Now we're going to have our breakfast. It's been quite some interesting journey from 7 up to now. Till tomorrow, good morning.